Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the Weekend Wellness Hour. I'm very excited to have Kirstin Carey join us today. And she is here in the Arizona area, and she has an amazing background on how to deal with and resolve autoimmune diseases and work with them. And so she has amazing talents and background, including certified holistic nutritionist, professional chef, neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. I have to read all these because there's so many. Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Practitioner, a certified EFT and TFT tapping practitioner, as well as a biofield healing practitioner. So she has many certifications and she is well versed in holistic healthcare and wellness. And so I wanted to bring her in to talk to us about autoimmune diseases because people are becoming plagued with it more and more nowadays. And she has an interesting story. So thank you for joining us today, Kirstin.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. These are always so fun for me.
I'm glad. And you have an interesting story yourself with autoimmune disease. And why don't you share a little bit about your background and people can be wowed just as I was.
Well, again, I love it when people can say things like, well, when I was 3, I knew this is what I wanted to be when I grew up. And there was no time for Halloween. I dressed up as a nutritionist and that's what I wanted to be. The universe sort of dragged me here and I'm so happy actually to be here. But what it really happened is, I was a marketing and sales consultant for years and years and years. And I had my own business since I was 20. And there was just a point where I was getting sicker and sicker and couldn't figure it out. And at the time, I wouldn't have told you I was sick because everything that was happening to me apparently was so normal. My hormones were out of whack and my cycle was out of whack. And I was having adult acne, which is normal for my family. You don't get it as a teen, you get it as an adult, but it was horrifying and embarrassing. And all of a sudden I started gaining weight, even though I was the kind of person that could have eaten anything when I was a kid and I never had an issue, but that's normal for my family. And, you kept seeing some of this. I was seeing all these different doctors and I had, constipation issues and then diarrhea issues and all, you just keep adding them, right? But they all seemed normal because the doctors kept saying that's fine, right? Yeah. So it finally got to a point where I literally, and I was like in my 20s and early 30s, I couldn't function. I was going to conferences to speak at events and I was waking up in hotels so exhausted and didn't know where I was. No, you're overworking. So there was always an excuse, right? There was always a reason. And then it just kept getting worse. And I was having these anaphylactic responses. Like all of a sudden I'd get hives everywhere. I couldn't breathe all of a sudden and there was no rhyme or reason. So I finally saw an allergist and they were like, oh, you're allergic to latex and wheat. Wheat. But I was eating all this whole wheat pasta and low fat dairy because I was trying to be healthy and I was working out and all the things. So I was like, but it didn't happen every time I ate wheat. So that didn't make sense either. But they didn't know what to do with me. So they handed me 2 EpiPens and told me to have a good day. And here's an inhaler and here's some EpiPens. So I was like, this can't be it. So I kept looking and looking. I did all of the tests. I take all the medications, all of the supplements, all of the things. And finally, a naturopath did some testing and she's like, oh, you have celiac disease. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. So she explained it was an autoimmune disease that was basically attacking the gut lining. And I'm like, okay. So she's like, you can't have gluten. And that's all she gave me, really. A bunch of supplements too. I got like 1,000 supplements. So I went on my merry way, but I'm like, there has to be more to the story. So I finally decided to go to nutrition school and I opened a series of restaurants, which I do not recommend if you're stressed out to open restaurants.
Wow.
But I learned hard and fast how food really works and how the body really works and what that really means to your system and healing. And then I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's on top of it, which is the autoimmune disease that attacks your thyroid, which is the most common thing that we see. It's the number 1 most common autoimmune disease. And it was the first one discovered. So what you'll see, which my story kind of exemplifies, is that typically most people have, once they have one, there's usually a second or third one kind of hovering in the distance. Because the problem is the immune system attacking the body, not my thyroid was the problem or my gut was the problem. My immune system was actually the problem. And if you don't correct the immune system attacking self, then you're going to end up with more, or they're not going to be able to diagnose because there's not enough testing. I mean, frankly, there's really very few tests for the number of autoimmune diseases there are. So it's hard to nail them down. And most autoimmune diseases take between 3 and 10 years to be diagnosed once you've actually shown up with it. So the medical communities kind of catch up. So I started seeing clients in 2010 with the restaurants, and we started a whole wellness center within that. But I continued to say there still had to be more to the story, because even though I was getting better at a pretty decent rate, there was still something missing. Like there was still like random things happening, or I would suddenly lose weight or suddenly gain too much weight, or there were still other symptoms that weren't going away. And it was like, so that's when I started investigating more of what we call the soul work, which is really the emotional underlying trauma components. And that's where a lot of my letters after my name come in, because I grew up in an Irish Catholic household where you sucked it up, you walked it off, you didn't talk about it, you used alcohol or food to try to suppress it, whatever it was, and you didn't connect with emotions. Once I started learning how to do that effectively, not just I'm sobbing all the time, but I'm like actually connecting to what the body's saying, the whole world changed for me, changed for our clients in a whole different way. And that's where I spend most of my time with our clients, which we can get into later, but we have a three-pronged approach to how to identify what's going on, surface what's going on physically, mentally, and emotionally, and then actually what to do to dissolve that issue, whatever it is.
Right. And so what's great is you're addressing the whole body. So it's holistic and you're taking action, because autoimmune diseases, there are so many out there. And you said Hashimoto's is the most common one you see. What are some of the other ones that you see?
So celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis, we see, you know, what's interesting is they've kind of recategorized what autoimmune really is over the last several years. So heart disease and diabetes now fall into, type 2 fall into autoimmune as well. So, you know, it's broadening over and over and over, because they're starting to realize it's the body attacking cells, tissues, pieces of the body. So they're recategorizing a lot of things that weren't originally categorized in such a way. So you can say like lupus, most of the time, I mean, if you just watch TV for more than 10 minutes and you hit a commercial, the majority of the time it's going to be for a medication for an autoimmune condition, which is fascinating. So you're just seeing it kind of blow up. But a lot of people have autoimmune issues, like, you know, they have skin issues that they're like, oh, this isn't it. I'm like, it is an autoimmune disease if you really look at it from what's really happening. So most things that are out there are actually being recategorized into autoimmune these days.
That's interesting. And so your approach for that is a three-pronged approach, which you had mentioned, nutrition and science and the soul. So can we go through what you mean by each of those? You touched on soul a little bit, but we can dive in a little bit more if you are interested.
Yeah. So what we found is if people aren't taking this three-pronged approach where they're cohesively supporting each other, then they're not getting the answers they want. What we find is most people will go hardcore on like the diet and that labs. Right. So they get really in there because it's tangible. It's like, oh, I can look at a food and say, oh, I can't have a tomato because that's causing me a problem, and therefore I fixed it. So it's very easy. It's tangible, especially for those of us who are very linear thinkers. You know, we like to find our steps, and we have our steps, and then we can go do them. And the labs a lot of times seem like they make more sense to pay attention to, because it seems like something very tangible and measurable. The challenge with labs or the science is that your body usually is ahead of where the labs are showing. So it takes them a little while to catch up. So typically you see symptoms before you see something showing up on the lab to identify what's going on. And whatever the lab identifies is still a symptom of an underlying issue. Like people will think, oh, I have celiac disease, that's why I feel this way. I'm like, no, the celiac disease came because of some of the reasons you feel this way. So it seems backwards. So if we look at the nutrition, so the nutrition we see is three pieces. So each of the three pieces has its own three pieces. So nutrition, we've got the food, which I'm a nutritionist. I'm going to tell you all the time that food is going to have something to do with it. But what I can tell you with 100% certainty, that gluten and dairy are the only two factors we see that are consistent for every single person dealing with autoimmune and autoimmune related symptoms. So if you're eating gluten or dairy, even a little tiny bit, and I know I hate to say that because dairy was my very favorite thing, it is causing you an inflammatory response at a level that is basically, and this is a very simplified version, but it's basically telling the immune system, how about you go attack me? So gluten and dairy, not your friend. From there, it depends on the person. It depends on where in their health cycle or their healing cycle they are. So if you ever see somebody who's saying, this is the only way to eat, it has to be vegan, or it has to be paleo, or it has to be, take a step back, because it depends on the person and it depends on where they are in their own journey. Because with our clients, it tends to shift a little bit as their bodies start to get into more of a healing space. And really restrictive diets can be incredibly emotionally stressful, that actually then flip side cause things to get worse.
Right.
So diet's just a piece. And again, gluten and dairy is the only thing I can tell you is 100% nobody's friend.
Yeah.
Secondarily, movement is going to be important. Anthony, so my partner in life and crime, business partner as well, he's the science and nutrition side of what we do.
Okay.
Bodybuilder, he's 100% plant-based, which totally works for him. But most of our clients, we find plant-based isn't the best approach 100%. But, he'll do more of the movement stuff. He's also a certified personal trainer. We have a certified yoga instructor also on our team here. Movement's going to be important, but just like food, it's going to be the right movement for you at the process you're in. So sometimes movement, too much of it or the wrong type, is going to actually stress the system out more, putting you more in a panic or fight or flight kind of thing. So finding the right type of movement. Plus, a lot of our clients are in pain or exhausted when they first meet them. So the thought of even walking around the block can sometimes be too much. So the right stuff for you at the right time, also important when it comes to movement. And then supplementation. And this is also where we just like to caution people. If you're working with practitioners who are overloading you with supplements, that's also a sign that there's still something that's underlying that hasn't been caught. Supplements absolutely have their place, but if you're taking $500, $600, $800 of supplements a month and you have to stay on it or so you can't function, there's usually some underlying thing that isn't being discovered, or the body isn't working in the way it was designed to, and something's stopping that. But supplementation can be incredibly helpful when done effectively where you are in the process. So the nutrition, the food, the movement, and the supplementation is what we see as the nutritional part.
Yeah, and I have a quick question about the supplements, because can be a bit controversial whether or not you should use supplements. Then you have the whole thing, it's not regulated by the FDA, so you don't know if what you're actually getting. Now, and then if you take supplements, does that inhibit your body from making them?
Right.
So there's all these questions around it, and I'm not sure if you have the answers, but how do you approach supplementation with people who, are asking these questions and they're trying to find a company that works? Do you go to the store? Do you, go with a healthcare practitioner who has a line of products? How do you recommend it to your clients?
Again, I never like to, point to other practitioners and be like, hey, no, you're doing it wrong. Yeah. But I'm a little cautious when people have their lines, their white labeled products and things like that, not because they're doing anything wrong, but because there's just, where are they coming from? What's their approach? Our approach overall is, can we support the body the best as possible without the supplementation first? And there's basically two schools of thought when you're coming at it. You either over supplement somebody from the beginning, hoping to get them off of the crisis mode as fast as possible, something will stick kind of thing, or you kind of back it all off, calm the system down, see how it even can function without anything else supporting it in that way, and then you go approach it. We're a less is more approach. We'd rather see you do fewer things, see how the body really responds, and then come at it very systematically, than the throw all the spaghetti against the wall and see what's sticking and what's not. For many reasons. One, I think it's overload for the system, emotionally as well as physically. And then secondarily, it's financially stressful to be overloading thousands of dollars of supplements, not sure what's working and what's not. So the years we've been doing this, 11, 12 years we've been doing this, we've just found the less is more approach to be better. I'm a huge fan also of making sure whatever you do choose to take, that it is the best, highest quality you can have. Anthony does a ton of work on the back end here in the back scenes, making sure that even if clients are taking something and it's the type of brand they want, that it's supporting them all in, that even the quality of the production is good, that even the shipping is okay. Because sometimes they ship inappropriately in ways that it's too hot how it's being shipped, and it's actually hurting the quality of the product. So even though the product may have started good, it ends up in a bad space because of how it's being shipped. So there's a lot of detail in the back end that we're making sure they're not using tons of fillers or not using things that are working against people.
Yeah. And I'm glad to hear that, because it's hard to know out there, and it's a little bit scary. And especially when a doctor says, take these 10 different supplements. And I know in the past, I've gotten to the point where I could feel it in my body, no more. And then I won't take anything for a while. And then I may add in one or two things, but it gets to be where we have to exist and allow our body to just reset and feel what it actually needs.
Yep. And we're big fans of the cycling as well. So even if we do recommend something, there's still going to be a point where Anthony's going to recommend that our clients cycle off of it for a while.
Okay.
Let's see how the body's handling this. Because with a lot of autoimmune people, the number one thing you're dealing with is leaky gut, which is allowing things. The short story is basically the lining of the gut is too loose and things are slipping through that shouldn't. Well, this also goes for supplementation. So if you are overeating or eating too much of something, you actually can cause yourself a food sensitivity, food reaction to something because it's slipping through the gut lining. The blood sees that, says, I'm not supposed to see this, and then it starts causing that inflammatory response. If you're taking a ton of supplementation, the same thing can be happening. So you may now be causing a reaction to something that was at one point helping you. So it's, if you understand just from a preliminary space how the body works, repeating something like that often isn't necessarily in your best interest either. So cycling is also really incredibly important.
Okay, wonderful. So didn't mean to interrupt you there on the three things. So just wanted to cover that a little bit more detail because I know that's important. And so then the other two components, if you
so science. So again, that's broken down into three of its own components too. So the first piece is going to be the labs. Doctors love, especially, there's a point for all labs, like there's a reason for it. We've just found that most docs are overlapping people at this point because it's something that clients want to see because it's black and white, it's tangible, right? So they're taking thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of labs, which are a lot of times just reconfirming that they're sick. So rather than reconfirming you're sick, what we would rather see are what we can do to find out as quickly as possible, what are some of the underlying things that are working against you? Like is what's going on in the gut specifically? Which foods specifically are not your friend right now? What's causing an inflammatory response? So there's only 3 labs that we look at with our clients in the beginning to say what is happening, right? Because there's certain things, once you have autoimmune disease, we know certain things. We don't have to test adrenals. Your adrenals are in trouble. We don't have to test cortisol levels. We know that's in trouble. We know you've got a gut issue. We know there's these problems. There's no reason to reconfirm with thousands of dollars to say, yep, your adrenals are in trouble. Okay, we know that. Let's find out why. So when we're looking at stuff, we're looking at why. Anthony also, that's his area of expertise. He spends a lot of time around looking for patterns. So he'll take up to 2 years worth of people's labs that they've already have done, because most people are already coming with stuff. We'll look at the things that we do, and then he starts looking for patterns. So it's not, hey, you have this. It's, hey, you're on track for some of these things too.
Got it.
The combination of this with this shows that there's also another underlying issue that isn't bad enough to be diagnosed yet. But you're on track. Let's also make that part of the process for you, that we're not going to end up where we don't want to go. Where most doctors, especially, traditional conventional medicine, they're waiting till it shows up to be able to give you the diagnosis, to give you the medication, to give you the protocol.
Okay.
We'd rather catch something before it gets there.
Yeah. And then what are the 3 things that you guys actually test for?
So we do food sensitivity testing, which we find to be even more helpful than the standard food allergy testing, because allergies, usually you eat something, you blow up, like blowfish, we know. It's the food sensitivity, because the sensitivity response can be happening up to 4 days after you've eaten something. And we look at 2 different, so there's no way people are figuring that one out on their own, because they're losing their minds trying to food journal. And sometimes it's a combination of certain things at certain times, and it depends on your stress level. So people are like, I can't figure it out. So we're like, this one, yes, testing, incredibly helpful. We also look at 2 different sensitivity responses, where a lot of people, even when they're doing this testing, are only looking for one. We look for IgG and IgA responses. IgA can tend to be more of the skin and respiratory response issues. IgG tends to be more of the other inflammatory types of responses, like fatigue, headaches, digestive issues, things like that. We also look at a very specific gut response indicator. There's, I think, 72 markers that Anthony's looking at to give you a better understanding. Is there mold in the system? What is going on in the gut? Why is the gut imbalanced the way it is? What specific bacteria is happening? What specific yeasts are happening? What is going on that we can pinpoint and go, oh, now we can do something about this. And again, go after food first, stress as well. And then we can get a better understanding. If the gut is out of balance, no matter how hard you try, you're not getting up over on whatever the symptom is or the illness. So that's, to us, like point one. Let's just start here. And then if there's additional things after that, then we've got clients who will come with, like, if they're on thyroid medication, they're basically, they have to get testing every 3 to 6 months. We're taking that into consideration too. And then Anthony's looking at just a basic blood markers test for just a baseline of what's really happening with cholesterol, sugars, the basics that most people are probably used to, but he's looking at it from such a specific angle because all of our clients are dealing with autoimmune and autoimmune related stuff. So he sees patterns that most doctors aren't even knowing to look for. So it's amazing what he can get out of what most people would say was a basic test, but he's looking at it from the interpretation of an expert looking for underlying root issues.
And it's nice, he has that analytical mind and is able to look at patterns and globally attack it from that way. So that's wonderful.
So we've got the labs. So that's the part one of the three of labs. We've got the diagnosis and the, you see that as one. What is out of our scope of practice is we're not allowed to diagnose, which we can tell you what something looks like, but we can't say you have this.
Yes. And
then the second thing is we can't prescribe medication, and therefore we can't tell a client to stop taking a medication, though most of our clients are coming off and weaning from medications. We're supporting them having that conversation with their physician as they go through the program. But what they've been on in the past, what they've been taking, even if they took something 10 years ago, can have a major impact on how their body's reacting now. Yes. So we want to know the medications that they are on, that they have been taking. We want to know what they've been diagnosed with. We see a lot of misdiagnosed as well for many things as people go through as well, because doctors get to a point where they're kind of like, I'm not sure, but it looks close enough like it. And now I can stick you in this category and then I can treat you this way. And we've seen clients on medications they never needed. They've been overprescribed. It's been fascinating, but traditional medicine, that's how they're trained. Come up with a name, look for the corresponding medications, try them until you find something that's good enough, and then they're on the journey. So, so we take all of that into consideration. The third piece are protocols. Now, we've been doing this a long time, so we have our own protocols. Each person's still an individual, so we will tweak the protocols for the person and the individual. Like if we give them a particular diet plan to follow and they're like, I just can't, it's too much, I can't, that's going to stress them out too much. So we'll adjust. Or there's certain protocols that is going to work if you're just in this category, but if you're in this category, and this category, then we need to make other adjustments. So the right protocol for the person is also going to be important as well, recognizing that everybody's an individual and there's no one magic pill, magic thing, magic protocol. So that's the science as far as we've seen it, and that you feel really aligned with that. And then the last part, which is my favorite part, because it's my area of expertise, is the soul component. So when we work with people on the soul component, this is, and everybody has their own definition of soul, but this isn't a religious definition. It's the emotions, what makes you you, right? We can't take this part out. It's the you. And when that you is not aligned, when that soul component's not aligned effectively, you're going to end up with autoimmune and symptom related issues. So let's look at it from this point. And okay, so autoimmune disease, just in case somebody doesn't know what it is, autoimmune disease is the body attacking itself. So it's like a form of suicide actually going on in the body. What's confusing is why would the body be attacking itself if its job is to protect?
Right.
So what we do, and you'll see a lot of traditional medical doctors, even some of the holistic practitioners will say an immune system disorder, autoimmune issue, is an overactive immune system. What we see is it's not overactive, it's confused. Because it's still doing its job. It's actually trying to protect you from something it thinks is bad.
Right.
So it's not overactive, and we don't want to suppress it. And that's where a lot of the immune suppressants come in. Doctors say, well, we'll suppress the immune system and therefore the attack will stop. I'm like, kinda, but also it takes away the body's ability to protect you and help you heal. Because the immune system's job is to protect you and help you heal. So if you're suppressing that ability, you're not going to be able to get up over on what's going on, and you're actually going to spin further into other challenges, which is why they warn you when you're taking an immunosuppressant that you're more likely to end up with other illnesses, other bacterias, cancers, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So we want to kind of realign people and say it's not an overactive system, it's a confused system. So how do we stop the confusion? So when we look at this, if you look at it from an emotional or energetic side, if the immune system doesn't recognize you and you're not living in your own purpose, or you're not connected with who you really are and you're living the life you think you're supposed to versus who you actually are, that's a conflict. The body doesn't recognize you. So it's literally going to attack pieces of you because it doesn't think you're aligned with who you really are. You're living this other life, this masked fantasy. So when I work with people, the goal is to get you as close to who you are and figure out what's stopping you from being there as possible. So the 3 components to the soul is going to be aligning with purpose, aligning with identity. And if so you're waking up every day, and if you identify with being like an athlete and a go-getter and someone who just, you ask me to do it and it's getting done, but you're waking up and you're exhausted and you can't push through anymore and you don't know how to get there, that's an identity crisis, like a literal identity crisis. Or if you were raised like I was to suck it up, walk it off, you never show emotions, that we celebrated that in my house. But I was a person who wanted to be connected to that and but I didn't think I would fit in the tribe if I showed emotion. Got it. My father celebrated when we were like, look at my daughter, look how she's not showing emotion. Like, he was excited, right?
Really? Wow.
Right. I remember at 4 years old playing softball with my dad in the yard. I was firstborn. Boys were more important in my dad's family, so I had to kind of pick up for that too. And we were playing, and he threw the ball, and it ricocheted off the glove, smacked me in the face, split my lip open. He grabs me, runs into the kitchen, and my mother's making dinner, and she sees her firstborn bleeding from the face, so she's all upset. But my father was like beaming, like he's all happy. And my mother's like, "What's wrong with you? Like, your kid's bleeding. What's the matter?" And he's like, "Look at her, she's not crying." And I was like, oh, so the message to the 4-year-old brain is daddy loves you when you don't cry. That's the short story. That's an underlying trauma that most people don't see, but my dad's all proud because that shows that I'm strong and I'm more like a boy and all the things that got celebrated in his family. So he's not doing this because he wants to hurt me. It's not like the trauma most people think.
Right.
He's now super excited. I get the message, and that keeps getting reinforced in my house over and over and over. We don't show emotions. Anytime there was a tragedy or a drama, I was the one that sucked it up, and I got there and I fixed it and I walked it off and didn't show the emotion, but it was still there. Had to go somewhere. So that's where it started showing up as gut issues for me.
Okay.
It started showing up as acne for me. It started showing up as celiac disease for me. Because the emotions, if you can think of emotions as tangible things, like you think of a food or you think of a lab, it still goes somewhere. It has to be processed. And if you're just shoving it to the side and walking it off, that's not processing. That's ignoring. Right? So when we start looking at that, that's an identity crisis. That was an identity crisis for me for years, because I would struggle with relationships because I wasn't showing what I really felt, because I was celebrating who I was supposed to be, not the who I really was. And I struggled a long time with that. Until I learned to process that celiac disease wasn't getting up. Like it was owning me, right? And thyroid disorder, I wasn't speaking my truth. So that's an identity crisis.
So then you mentioned trauma. I just wanted to touch in a little bit. And obviously there's different levels of trauma. It looks in different ways. What are some of the signs or symptoms or questions that you may want to ask yourself?
So everybody's running around with what I call wounded children. We've got somewhere, the average person has somewhere between 4 and 6, what I consider a wounded child running around in their psyche. And the wounded child is a lot of times more in control than you think he or she is. So a wounded child, so how you know you've got this. If you find yourself in moments where all of a sudden you're really angry or really upset by something, like it goes from 0 to 60 in no time, and you're so angry, you're fighting for whatever this thing is. something that probably doesn't really even mean that much if you really could pull yourself out of the moment. Like your husband put the dishes in the dishwasher wrong, and you've told him before, but how dare he keep putting the dishes in the dishwasher wrong? Like, if you really look at that, it's just the dishes, but it means something else to you. Like, he's not listening, he doesn't love me, he's not paying attention. We're making that dish issue mean something else. Usually that's a wound that goes back way further. Right. People who celebrate that they're perfectionists, that's a wound, because there is literally no such thing as perfection. So if you think it has to be perfect, you're setting yourself up all the time for failure. Because you can't get it right every single time exactly the perfect way. So that's actually a wound somewhere. There's a wounded child running around saying, if you don't get it right, then this bad thing will happen. We've got people with what we call positive traumas. Like that was a positive trauma for me as a child, to think that not showing emotion was good, because my tribe celebrated that. And when we're kids, we have to kind of go along with the tribe, because hardwired into our minds is the idea that if our tribe doesn't support us and we're thrown out of the tribe, the likelihood of survival is much lower. So that's a hardwired animal instinct. I gotta not die. Because the body doesn't care if you're happy. It cares that you're not going to die. Like, that's its only job, is to keep you from not dying. So it doesn't care if you're happy about it, you're alive, right? So we're going to redo the things that keep us from not dying. It's pretty much the hardwired thought process. What we do with our clients is get them out of all the hardwiring, recognize how the hardwiring is there to protect them, but then get them more into the conscious brain to say, is that serving me the way I'm behaving now? It did at one point in my perception, but what do I do about that now? So rewiring, not undoing, not letting go of, not getting rid of, because that served you at some level. How do I now wire it to be what I need now? So that you understand, which is the third part, is the thoughts, the feelings, the beliefs in the soul work. Is it working in your favor? And a lot of people will think, oh no, being a perfectionist, that makes me really good at what I do. Being, working off of 4 hours of sleep a night, that's good for me, because look at how much I get done. That's a thought process that is no longer serving. So that's another thing. If you've got sleeplessness, if you've got anxiety, if you feel more depressed, unmotivated, not excited about life anymore, there's underlying issues going on. And some of them you may be reinforcing, thinking that they're actually good things, like, I don't show emotion.
So, and this is, I can identify with that, because there's this phrase out there, you'll sleep when you die. And that's a very common one that people, high achieving people, will identify with. And, I used to believe that. I know many people who still say that, and I've changed my tune. And now it's, if you follow that motive, you're going to die sooner from all the health conditions that can crop up based on the lack of sleep and what to do. So I get what you're saying, that we have these identities that really don't serve us at times, and we have to really look through them.
But culture will reinforce it. Culture reinforces the it's always a day late and a dollar short, or life is supposed to be hard, or marriage is supposed to be difficult. I'm like, is it? We're supposed to have challenge to continue to help us grow, but it's not supposed to feel like it all day long. And the idea that it's supposed to be that hard, like, I stayed in my first marriage way longer than I should have, because I believed it was supposed to be hard. I believed it was supposed to feel that way. And that's what the idea of you stay together, not you stay together happy, was more reinforced. How long have you been married? 50 years. Yeah, that's awesome. Not how long have you been happy? How long have you been in a marriage that works for you, that supports who you are, that supports your individual people? No. So it's, what's the message? What am I living in, and knowing that's not right for me?
Oh, I totally agree. I have a quick question related to nutrition. What do you feel about probiotics, and do you believe in using them or not? And if you do, when should you take them?
Yep, great question. Yes, we're big fans of probiotics. However, we would rather see people get them from food than taking them. A lot of times, if people have an imbalance of bacteria in their gut, taking probiotics will actually a lot of times work against you. So you'll see people actually things getting worse when they take them, or they're not taking the ones that support what their specific gut needs. It's not just take the 50 bajillion, because now every time you see them, there's like 200 billion, 900 billion. It's not more is better is necessarily the thing there. It's what's the type of bacteria support that your specific gut needs, which is why we do the testing that we do. Because just taking something to take something, because they'll say, oh, well, everyone needs a probiotic. Everyone needs a digestive enzyme. I'm like, not necessarily, or not necessarily that one. So I'd rather see people start with fermented vegetables. So things like kimchi or sauerkraut that's raw, cannot be cooked or else you're losing the whole benefit there. And just like a little teaspoon amount a day.
Wow.
I would, if you've never done it, I would start with one every other day, because it can definitely make some things move a little more quickly sometimes. So you don't want to like overdo it. A little goes a long way, but you're actually going to get more bacteria, effective bacteria, out of that than a lot of times out of the supplements. Also, you want to make sure you switch it up. So it's not the same sauerkraut every day. It's each vegetable will create its own strain of bacteria. So that's why kimchi is kind of nice, because there's usually multiple things, but it can be too spicy for a lot of people. But if you're going to do it, it's like purple cabbage, green cabbage, carrots, broccoli, like other things that are in there. You're going to get different strains. So switch it up is always a good idea.
Okay. That's wonderful. So now also, when you're going through this process of working with someone, what does that look like? Is this done virtually? Do they do it in person? And how does a person get started?
Yeah, we used to have offices. We used to have the brick and mortars. We used to do it all that way, but we had more and more people coming from outside the area who wanted to work with us. So we're completely all online now. Even prior to COVID, we got online. Sorry, hold on one second. I have one dog that's decided that she's going to be cranky right this second, because she knows I'm paying attention to you and not her. So yes.
Okay.
So if you lost my train of thought on all of that. So we're working with online. Yes. We went online in 2017. And it's almost all Zoom with our clients. We have clients all over the country now and outside of the US. And we can work in more group atmospheres, which is helping our clients more, because they're meeting other people who have like issues, have challenge issues that are similar. So they don't feel so alone. Like, I'm the only one, nobody gets it. I'm like, the storylines are very similar when you're dealing with the same challenges. So online is how we do everything now. We have a couple different programs we work with people within. But we have one program that now just singles in on the soul first, gets some kind of balance there, and then they can move up into working with the science and the nutrition as well. And then we have a deeper program that goes just hardcore, knee deep into the soul stuff. But we pretty much try and start most people out with, let's get into some baseline stuff on the emotional components. Let's get you stabilized there. So everything you do as far as science and nutrition is going to help you even that much more effectively. So you're not spinning your wheels and not getting anywhere. We have, and you know, what we do, there's a lot involved. So we like to make sure it's the right fit for everybody. So we either have meetings with people, like pretty extensive meetings with people before we work with them, or we invite them into events that we're doing. Like, we have another event coming up August 17th, and it's 5 days. It's the Rewire Your Soul Challenge, and it's 5 days where you can get in, and it's an hour to an hour and a half on each of the 5 days, where you get a little bit of who we are and what's going on, and we do some of the process. So you actually get to witness and participate in the process, identify where some of your root issues are, surface some of them, see what the techniques are that we're using, and actually get this like amazing taste of what it's like to work with us. Because if it's not going to fit for them, it's not going to fit for us. It's not a good relationship. That's not going to help. Yeah. But in these 5 days, you get a really good sense of what it would be like to work with us, what it's like to go through the process and get some of the answers. And if it's not the right process, you still walk away with answers in many different facets, which is awesome.
Right. And you mentioned that you have a program just for soul. Is that typically the area that you address first with people, or do you dabble a little in each of the three areas when you begin working with someone and, you know, working on the autoimmune?
It depends on the person. we used to just go at all three all at once. We found that
Mhm.
some people, it's easier if they just kind of work on the soul piece first, because they're
Okay.
so stressed out and they're so upset and they're
Yeah.
so wound up. They're actually a lot of times going to be more stressed out trying to do some of the other pieces. So we meet with people to decide what's really the best approach here, what's really the best thing. But if they're in one of the mastery level programs, we're going after all three at the same time in pieces. So we're
Okay.
like, start with this to get your foundation with the nutrition, start with this to get your foundation with the science. And typically it's the labs, we start with the science, and then start with this to start getting a foundation on how you can even get out of this running anxiety or this running panic, or this underlying, how do you even surface that there's something hidden? It's, you're reinforcing it and you don't even know it's there. How do you find that stuff?
Right.
So we can get them into I mean, basically, most of our clients are working with us for a year.
Okay.
So there's a year-long program. If you're in the whole thing, it's a year. Here's how it goes. So typically we want to know, we ask people these questions before they start working with us. Where do you want to see yourself in 12 weeks? Where do you want to see yourself in 12 months? And where do you want to see yourself in 3 years?
Okay.
This is the pattern we typically see for our clients. In the first 12 weeks, most of them are working on even underlying issues. How did I get into this crisis mode that I'm in? Everyone's in crisis when they come. They think they're in healing sometimes. I'm like, you're not, you're in crisis. So the two most important things in that first 12 weeks is understanding the why, like what are the root issues that are keeping you in this crisis cycle? And then the how, what do you actually do about it? Because once you know, you can't just say, oh, well, I had this trauma. Like, okay, but now what do you do? What are the tools that you can use to now start unraveling that, surfacing it, and processing it the way your body wants you to process it? Not how you thought you were supposed to, but how you actually need to do something. And how do you use those tools so you're effective? The next part, somewhere between 12 weeks and 12 months, is reinforcing the behavior and the tools. Because what most people will do, they'll get an old program, they'll be in it for 8 weeks or 12 weeks or something, and they're like, yay, I feel better. And then they go back to what got them there in the first place, or the underlying traumas, the underlying patterns they were in are still too strong and pull them back, even though they feel better, which is incredibly harmful, actually, because then you start becoming more dejected. You start feeling more devastated. You're like, well, I thought I could do it, but now I can't. See, I can't handle it. I'm going to be sick forever kind of thought process.
Yep.
It's just an old pattern that needs to just be rewired. So what we found is that between 12 weeks and 12 months, it's the reinforcement of the behavior and the identity and the connection. And then sometimes really hidden stuff will then show up.
Okay.
And that's where the people really need more support to make sure the old patterns that did serve them at some level aren't so strong that they're sucking them back in. So we spend the next 12 weeks to 12 months really reinforcing and staying on the line that's serving them rather than on a line that's dragging them under. Because once your body identifies a pattern, it's going to reinforce that pattern. Yeah. Whether it makes you happy or not, it doesn't care. It just says, I found a pattern, let's put it into autopilot, let's move on to the next thing. Well, if that pattern isn't serving you and it's reinforcing that pattern, even at an underlying level, you're not going to be able to do anything about it. So we work to make sure those hiccups, you get support to say, oh, it's pulling me back. Oh no, we'll pull you back up. Oh, okay, now I can reinforce long enough that the new tools, the new pattern is now the stronger one.
Right.
So yeah, so that's where we spend most of our time in those. And then some people decide to stay on afterwards for just support or just some sort of continuity component. Yeah. But most of our clients, it's a year for a very specific reason.
Right.
But if we start with soul only first, that's about 12 weeks. Okay. And then we talk about now what's the next level of this? Are we going to spend more time on all of the health components? Or are we just going to keep going deeper into the soul stuff?
Yeah. And one of the things I work with people with their fight or flight nervous system. And when you mentioned people come to you in crisis, so they're ramped up, they're in fight or flight mode. It takes a while for people to learn how to turn that down. Like you're turning the volume of that fight or flight mode down to get into parasympathetic relaxation. And it's a process because we still have those triggers that bump us back up again. And we have to recognize those, become aware. So I can see why, especially during that 12 weeks to 12 months, you're reprogramming, rewiring, you're supporting, you're allowing the nervous system to say, okay, I can be in this new existence. And it's beautiful for the body because then you're more likely to have success in the future.
Yeah. And that's the thing that is so frustrating for a lot of people, because they've seen success before sometimes, but then they start blaming themselves and saying, well, I screwed up, or and I'm like, no, it's the program wasn't designed to help support you through this point. Like anybody can suck it up for 4 weeks or 8 weeks, something different. But it's after that, well, I don't have enough willpower. I'm like, that's not it. The brain is wired to hold on to old patterns for a reason, because it thinks it's helping you. You have to understand that going into it. You can't just will your way through that, which is where you can do 3 dress sizes in 3 days. Like that stuff works for a reason for those 3 days, but then you fall back into old habits, and then you end up actually worse off than when you started.
Yeah.
So we don't want that, because that is part of the cycle of why your symptoms are still there. So that's a huge piece that we are in the learning curve with people on how do you get supported through that. And then you also get to see the way we do things, other people in their process and how they're going through it too. So you're learning from their hiccups and their challenges as well. So people, I think, are getting there faster with the process we do it, but not even the faster, it's they create a solid foundation more effectively, so that even if they do have a hiccup, they know what to do about it, how to fix it, and how to get right back on the track.
Right. And that's the beauty, is we want to teach people how to take care of themselves.
Yes.
So that we're all going to fall off the wagon. We're all going to have stressors. We're all going to backslide in different things that we're trying to accomplish. So if you have the tools and the know-how how to implement something like what you're teaching, it's a safety blanket, and 2, it's empowering, and 3, you feel better.
Yeah, and you feel better, right? And then you also recognize that I'm not just some screw up, or I'm never going to get better. You realize this is part of the process, because we can't stop life from happening. And we want the challenges to continue in some ways, because the challenge helps us grow.
Right.
Because without challenge, we're going to atrophy. So we need that pushback sometimes, but we need to recognize it's pushback and not recognize, oh, I've done something, so now I'm going downhill and getting worse. And there's a fine line between the two. And a lot of times people misinterpret them. So knowing, no, this is part of it. You got it. And okay, I have the tools. Okay, I'm going to go use them. And not relying on supplements to fix it all, or whatever.
Right. Well, this is wonderful. How can people reach you?
Great question. So if they want to jump into the challenge, they just want to make sure they register so they get the information on how to get in. It's and it's a free challenge. They don't have to pay for it. It's Nourish, Nourish. I'm shocked at how many people don't know how to spell that word. So Nourish123challenge.com is the site. You can just go in there and register. It takes like 2 seconds.
Okay.
Or our main website is just nourish123.com.
Okay. Wonderful. We really appreciate it. Any last minute thought or tip you want to give our listeners?
Yeah, here's the thing. If you don't feel aligned with the process, or you don't feel right here that this is the right thing, that it's not. Like, no matter what it is, no matter how perfect it's supposed to be, or all the things, you have to be aligned with the process, the thought behind it. And then whatever it is, whatever fear is holding you back, jump forward and do it. Because what would your 5-year older self tell you to do right now is what I always go for.
Yeah.
So
Oh, really appreciate that. And for regarding nutrition and autoimmune, so your top tips are getting rid of dairy and gluten, right?
Gluten and dairy, 100%, like not even a little tiny bit, like all in getting rid of it. That's the butter, the ghee, the dairy, the yogurt, the wheat, all of that. And at least giving yourself 28 days on that before you really are like, oh yeah, this diet's not working for me.
Okay.
But it's not your friend, like not even a little tiny bit.
Yeah. Good to know. And thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate all of your help very, very much for our listeners. And thank you so much. And people, please reach out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you guys for listening in today. Have a great rest of your weekend. We'll see you again next weekend. Take care and bye for now.